expert in lyrics. She's an awesome mom. She's a cat mom before, and like me, she's a talking enthusiast. So that's always a plus. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have Annie perform a song first, as we always do, and we're gonna go from there. We're gonna ask a bunch of questions. So guys, give me a thumbs up if everyone can hear me. Somebody just give me a quick thumbs up here. I want to do a little sound check for everyone. Annie, you can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Good. I hear the guitar. Mom, yep, you guys can hear me. All right. So the floor is Annie's. I want to see. Yep, thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you guys. So Annie's gonna take it away and perform a song for us. All right. Here we go.
Hey guys, I'm gonna play a song for you guys off of an upcoming album that's gonna be released soon. The song is called "One in a Million." Couldn't get away if I asked myself, so I didn't ask. Ran me out and I've been waiting. It's quiet on the highway, just the motor beneath me. Part of me died and I never felt more alive. Well, you really had me going. Well, you almost had me through. You one in a million of messed up young souls. Yeah, you're driving around till your new tricks get old. Yeah, you're like girls and you think you're so tough. Lost little kid turned crew. Yeah, you're one in a million of men like you. I couldn't run any fast enough, but I still have those scars in the school of life. Those on my top marks. Couldn't run away fast enough. You tell me no, you tell me yes. It's all about your finger on my neck. Well, you really had me going. Well, you stood me. You one in a million of messed up young souls. Yeah, you're driving around till your new tricks get old. Yeah, you're yelling at girls and you think you're so tough. Lost little kid turned crew. Yeah, you're one in a million of men like I don't care if you cross the street. Boy, you must be honest, babe. You wanted things to end like this. You one in a million of messed up young souls. Yeah, you're driving around till your new shit gets old. Yeah, you're yelling at girls and you think you're so tough. Lost little kid turned crew. Yeah, you're one in a million of men like you. Yeah, you're one in a million of men like you. Yeah, you're one in a million.
awesome.
Thank you so
Beautiful.
much. Thank you.
That was amazing on the phone too.
Oh,
That's great.
thanks.
Amazing. So, guys, that's Annie. And can you talk about a little bit about that song? That's one that you wrote from an upcoming album, correct?
Yeah. So that song was about, a specific. I'm gonna make sure this is down all the way. That song was about a specific year in my 20s. It was when I was 24 and I was living in this little town with my friend and I was a waitress. And I moved out of that town kind of in the middle of the night. Like, it was one of those, you can do that when you're 23 or 24. You can have a bad breakup and quit your job and just move home in the middle of the night. Yeah, I attempted to write a lot of songs about that year of my life. And I actually wasn't able to write anything that was like honest or worth listening to or worth singing until a solid 6 years later. So just a throwback to a wild, traumatic, seminal early 20s year.
That's so great.
Thanks.
That's great. Yeah, who doesn't have 20s like that, right? That's the time when you can just run wild,
Yeah, I think if you don't have a couple bad years in your 20s, you're missing out.
Oh yeah, you have to have that, right?
Yeah.
That's where a lot of good songs come from, I think. So. I definitely want you to sort of introduce yourself and talk about your projects, what kind of your style is.
Okay.
And what you have coming.
All right. So my name is Annie Stokes. I am a folk singer-songwriter and a kind of rebel country, I guess, or dark country Americana artist from Virginia. I'm from Northern Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountain foothills. I have been writing songs and performing them since I was 21, 22. I was a poet before that, which we'll talk about later. But I've released some music. I released some albums and EPs and stuff. But my upcoming album, which is called The One That Gets Away, I'll be releasing it in early 2021. I kind of consider that my debut album in certain ways because it's the first one where I really sat down with these songs and self-produced them and spent a lot of time, spent as much time as I needed getting them out. So that is kind of where I come from. I'm a folk country singer-songwriter from Virginia.
I love that you're taking the time too. There's no rush, right?
Yeah.
There's so much rush music now, and that's like you're a songwriter and you're a artist, so that's always going to be in your music. It's just something we can't rush, right? And I think that's the biggest saturation right now of rough music. So I love what Will said. What makes this song great? It's pretty and sweet.
Oh, thanks.
How is your 1 in a million? A unique point of view. I want to feel more of the wild 20s, as you mentioned, Andy. Well, unique point of view, I think everyone has that, right? And I think everyone's story completely different, right? We all have that 20-year-old youth story, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has such a different experience, right? And I think this is just a collection of what Annie went through and what she learned.
Yeah, and I also, that song specifically was about just the type of person that you like really get messed up over in your early 20s, where you're like, oh my God, I'll never love like that again. And then you're like, oh, I just need to go down to the local Sheets and there's like a lot of more of you, which sounds really awful. Everyone's unique and beautiful in their own way. But sometimes to move on and get over it, you have to be like, okay, there's other fish in the sea.
100%.
So 1 in a million is, 1 in a million means there's millions of you.
I love that. Before we go any deeper, I saw the word coffee on your Instagram bio, and I'm like addicted, and like I go crazy. So the first question for you is, what your favorite seasonal coffee is right
now? So I'm a black coffee drinker, but my little coffee shop that I work at, we make pumpkin spice with real pumpkins. So I suppose I would have to say pumpkin spice because we make real pumpkin spice. But when you've worked in coffee as long as I did, which is I've worked in coffee since I was 18, so that's 13 years. Yeah, I can't, if I want to drink that much coffee, I have to switch to black coffee or else I'll just kill my pancreas. So, yeah, seasonal coffee, summer, fall, winter, black.
That's awesome. Real pumpkins. How do you guys go about that?
We just get pumpkin pie mix. It's kind of gross, actually, when you think about putting pumpkin and coffee together. I know. I know.
Yeah, it's good though. There's not, if I wasn't doing music, I'd be in coffee, 100%.
Or you can do both.
Yeah, right. Open a coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
So we got that coffee talk out of the way. I was actually really excited for that. So let's talk about the songwriting, right? Obviously, like, I'm listening to your lyrics, and there's a lot of five senses in there, right? And to me, that seems like, okay, this is somebody that knows what they're doing when it comes to writing, right? So I want to talk about where your songwriting skills began. I know you mentioned you were a writer first. So how did you get into writing? Right? How did you get into songwriting?
So my whole life, like ever since I was 5 years old, I've liked writing stories. I was always that like weird, nerdy child who was like writing novels in my like My Little Pony spiral notebook. So I always liked writing, always loved writing. When I was in high school, I got really into the art of like crafting a novel and building a story from start to finish. And like, I also really liked writing poetry. So for all of my life, as long as I've been a speaker of language, I've really liked writing and crafting a good sentence because, you know, as we all know, a good sentence or a good snippet of a poem or a good piece of a paragraph, like people get that tattooed on their bodies, like people put that on their gravestone. So there's something that's really important about being able to craft a good sentence. And then when I was in college, I'd always loved singing and I'd always loved music, but I kind of lacked the confidence to think that I could play an instrument. And then when I was in college, I started playing an instrument, and it was like everything kind of just fell into place. Like, okay, I can write things and I'm learning how to play an instrument. It's actually not beyond my abilities. So that's kind of where everything joined the same track.
Of course. And coming from that writer story background, like transitions, right? Like writer as opposed to instrumental first. A lot of artists that I've talked to always start with a guitar or something. Like, oh man, I don't know how to write lyrics, or just humming something. So when you're writing your lyrics now that you're playing your song, do you hear the music in your head?
That's a good question. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. I can't say that I have a set way to write music. Sometimes I do sit down and I challenge myself to find a chord progression that I like. But more often than not, it starts with a phrase that's floating around in my head that sounds catchy, and then I find the right chord progression for it, and I find the right melody. So I guess overall, despite the fact that you can't make a blanket statement about every single song you write, overall.
Of course. I love this statement on your bio. When I was looking at your website, it says, from the beginning, you would get inspired by snippets of conversations you would hear, or certain smells and little moments. And that's such a writer thing, right? Because you have into the five senses, right? And can you like explain what, like a snippet of what, like you're saying, it inspires you? So what comes up? Is it like the whole story comes at you if you hear something or smell something?
Sometimes, yeah. I do write autobiographical songs. I do write autobiographically inspired songs, but I also write story songs, you know, and sometimes it's literally just having a conversation over dinner on a Friday night where someone says like, well, we all break even in the end, or, you know, hell if I know, or some sort of phrase that sticks with me, and I'm like, that's a catch, or like a hook. Or sometimes somebody will be telling me about a story, or I'll be watching a TV show and I'm like very into that dynamic, a character dynamic, or I'm really into the way a river looks at sunset. So it is like it's a 5 sense experience, but it is a lot of also just like eavesdropping.
Sure, yeah. You sit in a coffee shop. That's actually really cool. I had a really bad writer's block a while ago when I lived in LA, and someone recommended like write your songs as if you're writing a short story. Take yourself out, right?
Yeah,
it's fun, right? Characters and like the story. Like it's actually a really interesting thing to do when you kind of take yourself out of the song. Be your message, but you have a character. It's really cool.
And I think it can be very freeing too if you are able to express yourself in that way. And also sometimes when you're a songwriter, I mean, writing about my life is, and you're a songwriter too, so writing about our lives can be very cathartic and very necessary. But sometimes sometimes you're in a good place and there's not much to write about, or like maybe you've written all you can about a breakup or a relationship or whatever. So sometimes it's like, okay, I can write about other people and the pressure's off to have this super
dramatic life experience that I have to write about, you know.
It takes the pressure out of it.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Like
Yeah.
the less it's like the less I'm like mostly attached to the song, the quicker it goes, the better it sounds. That's my rule now. Like, but there's always those times where those emotional songs are just there and they kind of like come out of you, right? It's crazy.
Exactly. But I definitely think that when you're too close to the song, you can kind of tell, because it's like, okay, you're trying to force a certain narrative through because you need that to be the truth. But if you can stand back from the song and the situation, then you can just write the objective truth.
Absolutely. Would you recommend like journaling and stuff that helps you?
Definitely. I think journaling can help people for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I mean, so pretend you went through like a traumatic life event or a big life change and you wanted to write about it, but you didn't feel like you were out of the trenches enough to write a good, honest song about it. You can journal about it, and then 2 or 3 years later, or however long it takes you to feel like you're past it, you just read those journal entries, and it's just like a treasure mine of like, you're still you, but you're kind of removed enough from the situation to be like, wow, this girl is crazy. Let's write a song about these life experiences.
It's scary going back to my old journal entries, but it's like, it's such an amazing way that we don't realize that we're like communicating with ourselves.
For sure.
So important. And that's again, like I'm like journal, I'm like, whoa, you're not so attached to that moment. You just write about it. It's so freeing, like you said.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what's your process? So, like, I know you have a lot of writings and stories and stuff, but like, what's your process now for writing songs?
So I usually don't write a song all at once. I'll have an idea for something, and I'll write down a hook or the title or whatever is floating up in my mind. I try and get enough of my thoughts onto the paper so that I can kind of like sink my teeth into it, and I can come back to it and not be like, why was I writing about like Japanese cherry blossoms or whatever? But yeah, I'll write down kind of like the skeleton of the verse, the skeleton of the chorus, maybe some melody, but then I tend to leave it and let it marinate for a little bit, and then I'll come back to it. Obviously songwriting is a discipline, so you can't just be like, oh, well, this will get done when it gets done. Like, you have to make yourself sit down even if you're not feeling totally inspired. But at the same time, if you're really trying to like get milk out of a rock, you're not gonna.
Agreed.
So my songwriting process is a kind of structured, disorganized process where I try and sit down in consistent blocks, but I don't really have too many expectations for like, all right, I'm going to write 100 words, I'm going to write 40 measures of music, and then I'm going to write the arrangements, you know?
Sure. That answers my question on like how you take from writing, because I love to write too, and writing a book and all that stuff. And I had a creative writing teacher, and she was like, you know, like, it's different. When you're writing on paper, you can't, like, you'll stay on the same word if you just start judging it, right? And you're like, oh, I want this to go that way. Like, no, it's like, that's why starting with a pen and paper for me is like so freeing. And like you said, like, get everything out. Go back to it later. But that marination process is so important for what I'm learning, because when I lived in LA, people would go so fast, so fast. You got to have 5 songs this week, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, whoa. They all start sounding like the same song, number one. And then number 2, it's like, there's so much crap in that energy there. And that marination process is like, when you're exercising, you have to take a rest between each rep, right? To grow. It's like, the rest is as important as the work.
Yeah. And then you start having those songs that sound like they came out of a factory, because they really did. When I was in college, I read this book called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. Have you heard of it? It's for those of you who haven't, it's a really amazing book about writing, and she kind of digs into that whole, you know, you do have to you have to set down time for yourself every day. You do have to treat it like a job in a sense, and you have to find, whether it's 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., you have to set down an hour, but then within that hour, just let yourself be messy and don't pull back and think like, oh, does that sound stupid? Like, that's not the point. That's later. Editing is later. So yeah, definitely giving yourself space within a structured, creative setting.
It's like a controlled chaos thing, right?
Exactly.
That's the word I like to use. Yeah. And like you're saying, putting time aside. I know your mother as well as a cat mother of 4. So how in the world are you managing and balancing all that?
Not very well. I'm not gonna lie to you. So when I say we need to put down time to write songs, I say that as an ideal of what we should be doing, but there are many days where I don't have my perfect little, 6 a.m. coffee and songwriting thing. It's more of just, it's a goal, and sometimes I meet it and sometimes I don't. And especially when you have a child, you kind of have to lower your standards for what your day is going to look like. So, if I get my songwriting done in 5-minute increments at the coffee table while Sesame Street is on, like, maybe that's not what you would have in your head as like this placid creative songwriting session, but it's what you got to do. So the answer to that question is I'm handling it imperfectly and frequently not handling it at all, but my living room is very messy because I try and have my guitar out and my songwriting journal out and all of that stuff out, just so that if I do have like a downtime of 10 minutes, like that's better than not writing at all.
Of course. Yeah, anything is better than nothing.
Yeah.
100%. You're talking a lot about hook also. And I know a lot of people that start from hook. Is that something that you do?
Yeah, I usually come up with a phrase and then I really like it. Sometimes I'll think, okay, I'm gonna write a song about this theme, and then I'll start from the theme. But more often than not, it's like a phrase that I really liked, and I'm like, okay, that would sound really good in like a kind of spaghetti western song. That would sound really good in kind of like a haunting ballad song.
A lot of the struggle, even for myself, is coming up with a hook in terms of the lyrics, right? The melody and the music part is sometimes there's like a sort of formula to it. Like listen to the notes, but it's really interesting question for me to ask you as a writer. It's like when you're focusing on a hook in terms of words, what do you look for?
I usually look for phrases that are already part of the zeitgeist or part of the lexicon, and then I try and find a new way to give them meaning. So almost kind of like a little, like turning it on its head a little bit. Or yeah, maybe kind of like a little wink behind like, oh, this is a common phrase, but I'm attaching a kind of a different or ironic meaning to it. That's kind of been the theme of my most recent album that I've been writing. I had a lot of phrases that you hear, especially like in the South or in the like Appalachians where I live. Well, I live in the foothills. Actual residents of Appalachia would argue with me on that one, but I live in the Catoctin Mountains. So, just things you hear around, and I was like, I'm gonna turn that into something, but not what you think it is. You're gonna start listening to the song, and then you're gonna be a little surprised.
Sure. Do you give yourself limits, or, because there's different types of choruses and hooks for me. There's the ones that are very repetitive, and there's also the ones that are kind of like the peak of the story. So is there a point where you decide that, or is there a point where you're like, hey, maybe it's a bit too busy? Do you give yourself these kind of boundaries to work in?
No, I don't, but I do know what you're talking about. Like, there are definitely songs where the simplicity it's 3 chords in the truth, and it relies a lot on simplicity and repetition. And then there are songs that are a lot more complicated, and I think the song will tell you what the song needs, because I definitely have written songs, and I have songs coming out on this album that there's like no bridge, and it's very few chords, and then I also have songs that are like 5 minutes long, and I did write a bridge, and so for individual songs, no, I don't create boundaries for myself. But if I were thinking of an album and like crafting an album, then I might think to myself, okay, how many songs do I have on here? They're like ballads do I have? And then on a larger sense, yes, I do.
Does setting ever have a play on with the song? Sounds like say you're at a coffee shop versus you're outside versus your home.
Yeah, it does. Because a lot of the songs that I write are, when you're in the country or the folk or the Appalachian genre or Americana genre, a lot of the songs that you're writing are regional. They're about nature, they're about a certain lifestyle, they're about a certain storytelling lifestyle, and that's obviously very influenced by geography and environment. And I've written songs before that were like very specifically, like every song was about a different place that I'd lived or a different place where like my family had lived. So yeah, and you know, because I really like to write songs about the things people say and what the natural world looks like, and obviously regional isms change depending on where you are. Yes, you know, and definitely when I was living in, I've lived in Lynchburg and Stanton, and now I live in Western Loudon, Leesburg, kind of the edge of Western Loudon, all of which are mildly rural places, and I think that's definitely impacted the songs that I write.
Very interesting. That'll happen too when I'm like, I don't like to write songs in the studio because it's like same. Like I feel pressure when I'm in the studio. I'm like, no, I don't want to write it here.
I've never written in a studio.
To see how that can spark different ideas.
Have you ever like gone on a songwriting retreat at like an Airbnb?
Not in an Airbnb, but when I lived in California, I would give myself weekends to go to a different place. Whether it was San Diego, Venice Beach, wherever it was. What was interesting is like come up with completely different ideas every time. And like you're saying, eavesdrop, right? I would totally eavesdrop on people.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to write a story about that guy or that painting or like whatever it was. Or sometimes words would stick, like you're saying. And that's always, anytime I've ever gotten to a writer's block, I'm like, you know what? The song's out there. I just gotta find it.
Yeah. You know? And then you have songs that are like very Venice Beach flavored or like San Diego flavored.
It's so different.
Yeah.
So different.
For sure.
I love that how like the environment you're in can totally morph that. I want to talk a little bit about, because I know I saw some shows that you had. You were touring a little bit. Obviously more with COVID, and some artists are adjusting digitally. Some artists are going back inward and like, I'm just going to utilize this time to write. Kind of, what are you doing to manage that? Are you still playing any shows virtually?
So that's I found myself in a very unique place with the pandemic because, so last February 2019, I was pregnant. And so I took pretty much my whole pregnancy to like write and hibernate and record. And then my daughter was born in October of last year. And then when the pandemic started in March and everything shut down, we had just started to book more shows. And so as disappointing as it was to kind of be on the edge of like returning to live performance again and then have that taken away, it also, we were already kind of in that zone of like, okay, well, we know that we can take a break and come back. Like, it's not going to get stale. You know, we had a very visceral experience of like FOMO culture is kind of fake because the industry, people still want to hear live music. So when this all started, we were able to adjust very naturally to kind of like, okay, I guess we're not going to tour. And we definitely, we did some live streaming, but honestly, we focused a lot on just finishing up the album. We did a lot of mixing, a lot of overdubs, and just kind of went back into that zone of like, we're hibernating and we're making something really good. So I have a lot of friends who had planned releases in spring and summer of this year, which really sucks for them because they had like actual tours lined up that were falling through. Whereas like I had like maybe a handful of like local shows to kind of like preview the album that got canceled. So obviously it's horrifying to think that certain venues won't be coming back. And, you know, the pandemic itself has obviously been horrific, but for our family, it was kind of easy to adjust and just be like, okay, well, I guess we're just going to be home with a baby.
Of course, so you're already kind of in that.
We were already there. We were already hibernating. We were already making stuff. We just were like, we'll wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Of course.
With the recording
process
and all the mixing and stuff, is this stuff you're doing yourself, or do you have an engineer?
No, we have an awesome engineer. His name is Ben Green. He's at Iva Coda Recordings in DC. And we've been working with him. The album is self-produced by me and my husband, Will. But he, as an audio engineer, was just such a crucial part of that because, you know, we were the ones making the creative calls, but he was the one who was like, okay, so this is your this is your direction you want to go in. And I think I'm hearing a slightly dissonant note on the bottom that could be taken out. And he was just awesome. He was a really great person to work with. So we were recording with him, and then we did some overdubs at a local studio called Crescendo. And then one of my musicians has a home studio. But that was also another reason why the idea of stretching things out a little bit longer kind of worked for us, because we're self-funding the album and we're recording it outside of our home. So, you know, again, not that anything about this pandemic will ever be worth it in any way, shape, or form, but our kind of like silver lining was that we were like, okay, we can have an extra 5 months.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're breaking that up between the writing, the production, the mixing, kind of not jumbling it all into one process.
No, we couldn't because of, again, the baby and the money and all of that stuff. But yeah, that was a kind of blessing in disguise that we wrote the album. We had to sit with the album. We recorded the album. Then we had to sit with the recordings. Then we mixed it. Then we had to sit with the mixes. And now we're finally, like, we know this album backwards and forwards, and we feel very confident in the product we've created because we had all that extra time to, you know, make it what we wanted to make it.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
I love the process. It's such a from the heart. I love that. Another thing I want to mention is your Instagram feed is like
so well done.
Really? Oh my God! Thank you.
Yeah.
If there's any tips you have for me, because like your color scheme's on point, your website's right there. Like your message is so clear. Just by going to your page for a second, right?
Yeah.
Like I love that. I was noticing that the first thing. It's just like you have such a powerful message, even if it's like you're not saying it. It's just the storyteller that I see. You're showing and not telling. What I learned is the most important thing, and it's like immediately you get that.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And my tip for social media is that I actually worked with Cyber PR. Jamie was my contact at Cyber PR, and so she gave me some pointers. And she helped me out with my color scheme and stuff. And it was one of those things where I, as a millennial, peak millennial, I love Instagram. I love it more than I love Twitter or TikTok or Facebook, even though we have to utilize all of those platforms at times. So it was one of those things where it was just a couple things clicked into place. Like, what are your favorite colors? What are the colors of the album design that you're going to be releasing? Make those your themed colors. And like, what do I like posting about? Well, I like posting about my cats, my daughter, reading tarot, and like doing latte art and memes. So like, let's kind of boil those down so that it's more thematic instead of just like my brain vomit at 3 a.m.
It's organic.
You know,
I want it to be organic.
Artists. It's not about just blasting music. Like on my page, it's like where's like even with you, like there's no, it's not like there's music right there. It's not even the main focus. It's showing who you are as a person.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I definitely, as an independent artist, I'm not signed. I work, obviously I have people I work with, but I'm not, you know, I don't have people managing me. So I have to utilize social media, but because of that, I don't want to overutilize it, and I don't want to annoy people and turn them off. And I also have like values that are really important to me and that play a big part of my music. And I don't want to, like, I don't want to turn people off of me or my product, but I certainly don't want to turn people off of these causes that mean a lot to me. So you kind of have to be like, okay, I'm going to have a posting schedule. I'm going to make things coherent, but ultimately this has to be a conduit for me to talk to people.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what's the point? You know?
Yeah, it's social. People forget that. It's like social media. It has to be a conversation.
Exactly.
Which platform do you think works the best for that for you? Like, is it Facebook, Instagram, Twitter?
For definitely Instagram. I really like Instagram. Although I'm trying to use Twitter more. I feel like on Twitter I just say stupid shit. It's like my jokes where I'm like, my jokes where I'm like, Instagram's a visual platform, so I can't make this really sick joke about the vice presidential debates on Instagram. So I'll do it on Twitter. But yeah, so maybe I need to, I don't know, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, maybe I'll be more motivated to post on it if you guys were interacting with me.
The thing about Twitter is like, imagine posting like 5 or 6 posts a day on Instagram. What are you doing? What are you doing? 20.
Yeah, it can be your diary, which is a little scary. Maybe I can overshare on Twitter. Facebook, I don't use a ton of Facebook right now. I definitely want to get better at using Facebook. I think because I grew up with Facebook. Again, I'm 31, so I got my first Facebook when I was 14. So honestly, now it's just kind of like, you know, I'm over it. But people are doing creative things on it, so I could try harder.
Of course.
Yeah.
I want to dig into this message that we're talking about. Speaking about what you're about.
There's definitely a lot in there about
gender dynamics and even just like the current state of
what we are,
you know, and the economy and humanity, and it's hard to put that stuff in your music. So I want to talk a little bit more about the gender dynamics and how you're able to put that into the music in such a smooth way.
Well, I think what you have to, first of all, you don't want to, when you're making like message or activist songs, you don't want it to sound like Schoolhouse Rock.
Exactly.
You know, like you want to make it natural and organic. And the thing about gender dynamics, much in the same way, much as with like racial inequality, is that it's not just an ingredient that you add in later. It's such a foundational part of the human experience, like gender dynamics and also gender inequality. I can't speak very much to racial dynamics as a white woman, but I still would like to participate in that conversation. But these are just not, it's not like, oh, I'm going to write a song and then I'm going to throw in a zinger about my experiences as a woman. It's like, you know, that's such a huge part of any piece of art that you create. So, you know, a lot of my songs are about, or kind of touch on gender dynamics, or kind of touch on the unique experience of being a woman or a femme identifying person. But it's not overt because it's universal, if that makes sense.
I like that.
So just don't overthink it. Just be honest.
Somebody told me once, speaking about stuff like that, any sort of strong message you have, especially about humans and behaviors and all those types of things, it's instead of kind of preaching it, starting a conversation.
Exactly.
And that's really what I noticed really well. And you can tell even by your feet, you know, it's an art, really is. Because it's like tread carefully nowadays. You have to do that because, you know, things get eaten alive out there now.
Yeah, and I also think bringing it up as a conversation, not that we all have to be responsible for everyone else's education, but we are, if we were born knowing this, or if it was an easy thing to learn, it wouldn't be a problem. 100%. So I think sometimes like woke scolding on social media is only cathartic for the person who's doing it because you get to yell, but it doesn't actually like help your message. And so unless somebody's being intentionally ignorant and trolling you, it's always best to bring it up as a conversation, because I used to not know about a lot of stuff. I'm sure there's stuff I don't know about that I'll learn about through engaging in a conversation. And, you know, obviously you want to be respectful of the people who are educating you, and you don't want to feel entitled to be like, oh, educate me or anything. But in general, if you have the emotional capacity to bring it up in a conversational and confrontational manner, I think you get further.
I think that's what great art comes into, because so many great songs, so many paintings, any sort of poem or story, they do such a good job of including that part of their character in it without it becoming like scolding like you're saying. I can't think of a great piece of art that doesn't have that in there. You know, it's the values and the core values and everything that speaks out of it. It's an art form in itself to do that.
Well, you know, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, fight for the things you believe in, but do so in a way that inspires others to join you.
All about inspiring.
Yeah, you gotta organically show off your values, and then your people will come to you.
Exactly. And it's not like you're going out to look for the right people. When you're so strong about your core values, there's like sort of magnetism in it where that community starts to build. That's what I've noticed too.
Yeah, definitely. And when you, when you're building your brand or your social media presence around your organic values, you want to be upfront about them, because you don't want people to get in there and then 6 months later be like, oh, this is not what I'm about. Yeah, exactly. So you want to be honest, but again, if you were just honest in a way that's like unapologetic and unashamed, but also just like, this is me, take it or leave it, you end up having, in my experience, you get traction with the right people. And it's not so much about having like 1 million people follow you, but having like the right, even small amount of people follow you.
Always more important.
Yeah.
And that goes into like pitching songs, playlists and stuff. This is something that I like to focus on a lot, even with running ads, because I do a lot of ads for clients here. And like, what's the point of going after like the masses that work for some big artists, because those fans might totally not be about what you're about.
Yeah.
You know, having 10 fans that are super. And Ariel talks about super fans a lot. It's like,
yeah,
5 of those are so much better than 500 people that just follow.
Exactly. And that's why, you know, having this time off, this kind of forced time off, has been really a great way to build like my newsletter mailing list, which I didn't have before, but like now I have that, and I've been able to engage with people on my social media profiles that before I was just like, oh, thanks for liking me. And now I'm just like, hey, I saw you left a comment. That was really cool. And, you know, now we have, you know, again, it's not a grand number, but it's a number that's important because it represents a human being who's taking time out of their pandemic nightmare to spend time with you.
Of course. With your newsletter, what kind of content are you putting in there?
Oh, I haven't done it yet. I'm about to start it because we're actually on the precipice of release season for me. I'm getting all of my masters back, and I'm getting my graphics finished, and you know, it's all the final pieces are coming back to me. So I'm actually about to start that very exciting, kind of scary journey of personally emailing people. So I'll let you know how it goes.
It's just another way to storytell. That's what I like to tell people.
Yeah, sure. I'll include little. I'll just tell people stories from a day.
Yeah, even like writing short stories is awesome. Like,
yeah,
like that's the best newsletters I like. When it's not always, hey, my EP's coming out. It's like, hey, you know what? I was doing today, and I wrote this, or I took this really cool picture today. You know, some of that is like the best newsletter stuff. I love getting newsletters like that.
Yeah, or like today, I dunked my hand in a hot pot of boiling coffee. Yeah, so if I were going to send out a newsletter today, I would spend a lot of time telling you about that incredibly tragic event. But
gotta have.
Yeah, so I'll let you guys know how the newslettering goes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's brings me up to what's coming. You know, I know you're finishing up, getting all your masters back and content. So what's coming up?
So we have 3 singles that we are going to release. We haven't finalized release dates for them yet, but if you sign up for my mailing list at AnnieStokesMusic.com, you can be the first ones to know, probably around the holiday season, and then late winter 2021 we'll be releasing the full album. This is a really important album for me because I started writing it. We went to a cabin on the Shenandoah River for our songwriting retreat. Speaking of, you know, environment influencing your songs. And then very shortly after that, we found out we were expecting. So I wrote this album and created this album while I was like creating my daughter. And she was born in October of 2019. And very shortly afterwards, we finished recording it and started the mixing process. So this is super important to me because it was something that I did when I kind of thought I wasn't going to be able to do it. So I'm proud of it. And then I also, it just represents a new type of songwriting for me. And also somebody on our Instagram live has said, I missed newsletter content ideas. I didn't have any for you. I haven't sent any yet. I was just going to say I'm going to write short stories about my day, like how I spilled boiling water all over my hand.
So any ideas for mailing list? I'd like to keep them as, think of what, like, mailing list sounds like a professional thing, right? doesn't have to be. Mailing list for me is another form of social media. Like we were saying, Annie's a writer, so it's like write some short. If you've written short stories in the past, maybe throw them in there. For me, I'll have journal entries something. I'll throw them in. This is my thoughts on today. I thought maybe do something cool to share, or not taking a cool picture in nature. You know what? It shouldn't always be buy my song, here's my EP, here's the studio. Because I just like to think of it as what would I post on my Instagram, and it's just a deeper connection. Right? People take the time of their day, sign up to it, they open it, they look at it. So I like fun or something really in line with what I'm doing in a moment. So. Yeah. So anything else that's coming up? Anything else you want to say before we bounce? Because I know Instagram's gonna knock us off here in a couple minutes.
I just wanted to say that I don't have a ton of stuff coming up because the live industry is shut down. But hopefully, we will be able to have some socially distanced shows and things will be able to start safely opening up in 2021. So hopefully, we will be able to tour. We tour from all over the East Coast to Nashville. So again, if you guys want to follow me on my socials or my newsletter, we've got some really cool stuff for you. And I'm really proud of the songs, and I'm really proud of being able to work with Cyber PR. The whole team at Cyber PR has been super kind to me. And so I'm just really excited to hopefully expand the audience so that we can share these songs that mean so much to us with you guys.
I think you're doing the right thing with it, and I can't see why you wouldn't.
Thank you.
The secret people ask, and it's like, be yourself. I think it's that simple. Be yourself in all aspects. Your song, your social media, your mail, everywhere. Be you. And that's something that I really admire, because it's not like I want to be this one. No, you're just really you, and that's how you'll find the best. So amazing, guys. We're going to post Annie's links and her website and everything on post, because this is going to go up as a post on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff. So you guys can follow Annie and follow Cyber PR. If you have any questions, shoot a message to Annie, to myself, to Cyber PR, and we'll be here to talk to you guys. And I will see you all next week. Annie, thank you. You're awesome. And keep rocking.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye.